Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the ICG's Digital Academy webinar series. I'm Sally Allsop, the committee member responsible for running the webinar programme. So this morning, we're delighted to welcome ICG members Judith Rose, Mark Wally, and Dan Parker-Smith. Judith has worked in research for more than 25 years, initially agency side. For the last 10 years, she's been a content consultant and insight storyteller, writing copy and long-form content to help researchers bring insights to life and get them to land effectively with stakeholders. In 2023, she co-founded Explners, a business that helps brands, agencies, and businesses activate insights using explainer videos. Mark is a food and drink strategist, specializing in long-term category vision and innovation, a former head of food and drink at Global Data Consumer and insight controller at Greencore. He understands how things work on both the agency and client side. Mark also excels in insight delivery and impact. A huge believer in the value of storytelling, he runs presentation skills workshops and is a co-founder of Explners. Dan is a specialist filmmaker with a research background who understands how to balance research project goals with high quality video production storytelling. He was recently shortlisted for the MRS ICG Award thanks to his video work. Dan is also a co-founder of Explners, which fuses his experience in market research with his skills in filmmaking. So in this webinar, the Explners team will explore the rise of the explainer video through some of their favorite examples, deconstruct what makes explainers so powerful, and share some case studies of how the market research sector can adopt the explainer video to help clients activate the research projects that they and we have put so much hard work and investment into. As usual, there'll be a Q&A session at the end when you'll all be encouraged to turn on your webcams and raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question or contribute to the discussion. Alternatively, just type your questions as we go through in the chat box and we can read them out for you at the end. So this webinar has been generously sponsored by Norstat. Norstat is a European data collection company with large proprietary online panels in the UK and 18 other countries. Online survey respondents are primarily from panels we own or they own, which allows them to profile the customers the audiences their customers want to speak to, as well as providing reassurance about the source of data. In addition to online data collection, Norstat also supports CATI data collection and qualitative recruitment. Norstat is the trusted data collection partner for market researchers, delivering high-quality data from a range of methods supported by service models tailored to the requirements of their customers. So before we begin, here are some more events we've got lined up for you in the coming weeks. Don't forget that the quiz night is tonight in London, if anybody is attending that. And don't forget that we're able to offer you great value sponsorship opportunities with each of our webinars and online events. You just need to contact Lucy if you'd like to know anything more about that. So now I'm going to hand over to our speakers today, Judith, Mark, and Dan.
Thank you, guys. Just let us know when it's popped up on screen.
Yeah, I can see it. All good.
Brilliant. Okay, fantastic. Well, thanks everybody for attending and inviting us to talk about some of our favorite questions, which are what are video explainers, and more importantly, how can we use them and take learnings from them to activate insights. So that would be a really weird topic for a webinar in 2015, but in 2025, explainer videos are everywhere. So many of you will be familiar with Ros Atkins, who's really popularized the idea as a way of explaining. Sorry? Hello? Oh.
I think you could.
Who really popularized the idea as a way of explaining news events, which are generally very important, but often very complicated, and actually to certain people a little bit boring, and actually finding a way to make them more interesting, more engaging, and therefore resonate more. And you now see them on websites as a way of helping people
Hang on.
understand how to use products and services. You see them on social media, on places like YouTube, where you can learn about all manner of topics. So from things you never knew to things you never knew that you never knew, such as how QWERTY conquered keyboards. And if you go onto streaming platforms like Netflix, they're there too. And at their core, what they do is they take an important topic, often with some complexity, and they break it down in a really engaging way for an audience that likely did not know much about this 5 minutes ago. And this is really significant, not only in our industry, but basically for all forms of communication, because A, lots of things are important, B, lots of things are complicated, and then most critically of all, lots of people only have 5 minutes. And one way to think about it is they're almost like a form of documentary on steroids. Now, to let you behind the curtain here, we actually created an AI image for this, but in honesty, it was so horrific we couldn't in good conscience share it. So you're going to have to let your imaginations do the work there. Even within an individual explainer video, you'll come across a range of visual styles and devices. Judith and Dan are going to give you a few more examples in a minute. But what they do is, or what they are ruthless in their desire to incorporate whatever it takes to communicate the message. So that is often infographics, it's vox pops, it's data, it's news footage, and lots more. Often these things are coming in within seconds of each other. And this means really that they're information agnostic. It's not about just having one source, or because they're videos, it's being about video. They could be made up of qual, they could be made up of quants, they could be primarily from primary, they could be from secondary. Everything is there to serve the story. So it's not about the research and the research source, it's about what the research means. And that's obviously a really important thing for us, because we often talk about our research when the focus needs to be on what is the story that we're giving the client. So what we have here is a story told using a variety of inputs, cleverly connecting dots. It's part educational, it's part inspirational. So with all that in mind, and thinking about our collective personalities and how we like to see ourselves in this industry, presumably the insights sector was surely the first to embrace them.
Well, you'd think so, wouldn't you? But in reality, that's not actually been the case. And over the last 10 years or so, I'd say we've actually really changed as an industry. And, you know, we've got so much better at storytelling. There's much more of an emphasis on it than there used to be. But I think despite this, rather than sort of snazzy, impactful explainer videos, we do tend to deliver our results in sort of longer, more detailed reports. We tend to be big on the data and the methodological rigor, but we're still kind of less so on the emotion and on the impact. And I think there's a number of reasons for this. And I think, you know, one of them is that, you know, research is what we do. We've put all our sort of blood, sweat and tears into collecting all of that data. So actually, you know, it can be really hard to be selective and to not show every single chart, you know, all 108 rather than just the 43. Similarly, you know, your client has actually paid for this. And you kind of want them to know where their money's gone. So, you know, it is really tempting to kind of shovel everything in there. Another thing that happens is that I think sometimes, you know, clients want to see particular data points included, or they've got an agenda and they want to make a particular point with the research. And so, you know, you can have your best effort at making something really punchy and effective, but you know, and then it goes backwards and forwards. And you know, we quite often see, can you please make it really punchy and impactful, but please can you also include questions 34A, B and C all cut by the key demographics, and you know, said with absolutely no irony at all. I think another reason that we sort of fall into this trap of being less storytelling and more data driven is that there's so much riding on the debrief. You know, quite often you really just get that one chance to shine. And again, that means we can be a bit sort of tempted to just cram everything in. And instead of that, we really need to think about, you know, activating insights as an ongoing campaign, you know, not have everything just resting on the debrief. And then there's not so much sort of jeopardy around, well, if we don't present that particular data point, they won't understand that we've done it. So taking all this into account, you know, it's kind of not that surprising that there's a bit of an issue now in insights around activation. We're really starting to see clients asking for it in briefs. You know, can you say how not just you're going to deliver the results, but how you're going to help us to activate them within our organization? And I think that there are some things that we can learn from explainer videos to help us to do that and to help us to tell better stories. Okay, so as Mark said earlier, explainers are really all about making complex things simple, and they do it through storytelling. And if we can kind of adopt an explainer mindset, we can apply this to all of the work we do. And it's not necessarily about making an explainer video, although obviously that's what we do. But this sort of mindset applies to whether you're delivering in a Word doc, in a PowerPoint, in a presentation, anything really. It's all about the storytelling, and it's about what explainers can give us to adopt that mindset. So if you think about the researcher mindset, it's kind of the opposite, really. We tend to start with the data, and you know, that obviously we've just collected it all and we've analyzed it, and we want to get it across, but we're really starting from a data-driven perspective. And quite often when we're putting something together like a report, we'll start off with the methodology, as we want everyone to know that the data is really trustworthy. And then we put in all the charts and we put in all the data points, and quite often we actually just tend to follow the order that the questionnaire has been written in, or the discussion guide, rather than actually kind of thinking a bit more about the story. What's the story? And something that explainer videos do, and a really great way of making that flip from data to story, is to think about the title that your presentation or your report might have, and a real clickbaity title, because this is what explainers do. Now, I'm not suggesting here that we go full Daily Mail or full BuzzFeed on the clickbait, although these 18 photographic coincidences are hilariously perfect, but I don't think that's necessarily the way that we should go. Rather, I would perhaps direct you to kind of our heroes in the video explainer world, which are a channel called Vox. And if you look at the titles of these three YouTube videos, they're kind of clickbaity. They make you want to click into them, and they're all kind of focused around the how or the what or the why. And we actually do this. We sometimes start with the title first. What might the title of this piece be that's going to really excite people and make them want to click on it and think about the story? And it's an entirely just different mindset. It just flips you from data first to story first. Another mindset to get into that comes from the explainer video is to think that the story isn't the same thing as the project that you've just done. Okay, when we're writing up a debrief or presentation or whatever, we tend to only include the data from the project, and only that data, which is kind of the opposite problem of putting too much data in, really. But actually what video explainers do so well is that they think about anything that can help to serve that story. So we need to start thinking outside the data to the context. You know, what's the context in which this this project has been done and what's going on in the world around that might impact it, and how can we bring in secondary research sources and other data points that might help really bring the story to life. And then the other thing, of course, that Explner videos do really well is that they're structured around story. And I'm not going to go into any of this in a huge amount of detail because there's all sorts of different models and ways of telling stories. There's a few different ones up here. One that I really like is the story mountain. And it starts off with a hook, how the author captures the reader's attention, and that's exactly what I was just talking about with the idea of a sort of a clickbaity title. That's something to really bring people in at the beginning. And so rather than starting with the methodology or starting with an introduction to you and everything that you've done, perhaps think about what's the really exciting, what's the hook, what's the title that's going to make people click, and then what's the hook, and then how do we build some drama and follow that mountain as our presentation goes on.
Cool.
Now, this slide is all about kind of the visuals. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to Dan because he's the real expert on all of that.
Thanks, Julia. So a key part of making an explainer is obviously having strong visuals. And I found this and I just thought it was a funny slide to share. This isn't a slide to sort of, have a dig at PowerPoint. PowerPoint is obviously a great tool, but like anything, using a tool badly is a missed opportunity. And so we really see visuals as a way to enhance the story. We've got a really great narrative, we've got a really good piece of information that we want to talk about. And so we build on that with really strong visuals. Specifically, it's about using a consistent visual language in our videos. So within an explainer, we like to think of this as the world of the video. So I've used, pardon the pun, a very black and white example here. The ones on the right are from one video, the ones from left are from another video. But you can see here, even just from this snapshot of a couple of stills, there's a consistency here, not just with the color, but the way that they're punctuating the data. They're using the same colors, the same fonts, the yellow little emphasis on the cars in the top, they're also using on the graph. So it's the same, cue to sort of go, look here. And I just think that's really interesting. But even, in a more sort of subtle way, these details really help the viewer connect with the story. So we like to think of the world of the video as the world of the story. And I'm sure we've all seen this, when we read a report, the ones that feel cohesive are the ones that feel consistent. So the colors match, the fonts match, the images feel consistent. And all these choices essentially imply meaning. It's not about going, oh, make everything pink because I like pink. And although obviously, of course, sometimes clients can be quite upfront about, well, it has to be in our branding, but it's really sort of trying to, get into a place where we're using these tools to think about the story. So specific words and specific visual choices that feel consistent and match just help us feel more engaged. There's also other things we can think about that when I mentioned before about visual cues. So I'm just going to show you a little example here. So there's the Guardian video on the top right there, which has a yellow highlight, which I'm sure we all recognize and looks pretty familiar as the classic yellow highlighter. And we see this in a lot of the explainers that we take influence from. They're using this subconscious cue to, tap into that feeling we can all relate to of emphasis. So it's visual storytelling devices like this that we can think about, even if we're not using video, that's something that you could do in any kind of medium. Obviously, I'm not suggesting that you highlight your entire report in yellow, but it's things that we can think about to sort of get us, as we're sort of saying, into that mindset of being a storyteller. But also, to that point, you don't have to say everything. Sometimes it's better to cut back on the words and show, don't tell. And I just thought this was a really cool example. So the still there from the bottom is from an explainer video from The Guardian. And they've got their written piece on their website, which is the photo from the top, but then they have these bullet points, and they've just kind of condensed all of that into one thumbnail and just sort of, they've put the little thing there, the 20 million, they've highlighted the yellow element with the flood defenses. And so you just look at it and you go, oh, yellow, that must be the 20 million there. And so it's just that instant connection. And so I think it just speaks to this idea of wherever you can possibly, try and be creative and have fun with it, just try and show, don't tell. Um, Equally, the images that we do use can change the story and make it feel very authentic. Um, like even we've all kind of seen that, the use of online community footage really bring to life a report and punctuate an insight. Um, but I guess it's important when we're thinking about images that we might use in a report to find the right images. So I just found these two examples online that I just wanted to, I guess, talk about, and I've just put three kind of words to describe these kind of images. So for me, the left one implies, ethnography. It's like very fly on the wall. It's observational. It's an observational methodology. But the right is almost like a studio space. This isn't to say one is a good image, one is a bad image, because the one on the right might be perfect for product testing, or something like that, and the left one might be good for ethnography. But speaking of space, style, and color, style, you've got a bit of camera shaking on the left, but not on the right, and that changes the feel and the colors. The one on the left is quote unquote more real because it's not as saturated. It might feel a bit more kind of authentic and real. Um, but it's really about which one is more suitable for the story that we're telling. And I know that sometimes clients can be like, put loads of pictures of humans in it because we want it to feel human. But all of a sudden, you put loads of stock imagery of humans being human in a report, and all of a sudden it can look really corporate. And I think this is why. It's because there's so much information that we're getting from these images that's almost unconscious. Um, so I think that what we can learn from here is, regardless of whether you're making a video or you're just collecting some images to show a client, we're telling a story with these images. So thinking about these subtle cues can really enhance what we want to communicate. Um, when we are making our videos, we can use even more tools to immerse people and help the audience feel really connected. So we're often using sound as well. So I'm just going to talk about that for a little minute. When we um, when we use like a handwritten font, we'll sometimes use the sound of like a biro pen kind of like scratching. We made this map of like a typical supermarket. And as this like dotted line was kind of going around, we had like, the sounds of like footsteps. If we'll show like screenshots from a website, we'll use computer clicks. Essentially everything that we're putting in there is whether it's words, whether it's sounds, colors, anything, it's all an intentional part of the story. And as we kind of said earlier, like if an explainer video is like a bucket and you're putting all of these things in, that it's all of that story is in there. And it's the same whether it's a video or a report. We're getting these subconscious kind of cues and reactions, oh, that was great. That was a bit boring. That was a bit long. And what I would say to that is it's really about perception. A video or a report only feels long. Um, sorry, it's only long if it feels long. So it's like the thing if you watch a 2 hour movie but you love it, it doesn't feel like a 2 hour movie. You're not sitting there going, oh well, I wish it was 5 minutes long. And and I think it speaks to this. Um, I don't know what the word would be like, but just this trend or like fetishization of oh, it has to be short. It has to be short. And we're aiming for short. It's not about short. It's about engagement and inspiring people. Um, so whether it's a 60-second TikTok video or a 3 hour podcast, um, attention is up for grabs, and we need to get better at fighting for attention because that's going to help us connect with our clients. Um, I actually wanted to share a couple of these quotes because this is from a panel of journalists discussing content for Gen Z, and it's actually part of a wider project by another ICGer, Conrad, who I worked with to produce some videos for a really interesting project for Channel 4. Do check it out. It's really cool. But part of this panel that they were discussing was to say, essentially, Ross Atkins, who we talked about earlier, was, don't assume people are going to read or watch, work to keep their attention from the get-go. And I think a sort of summary here is, how our work is going to be perceived by the audience, whether it's a video or report or anything, that's something we can all be thinking about when we are telling our own research stories. So I'm going to hand back to Judith now.
Thanks, Dan. And I think that's a really important point as well, because I think when we started out making explainer videos, we had some assumptions as well. And we were sort of thinking, okay, they're for complicated and important things. So they're going to be for projects like big investment projects, like sort of segmentations and for thought leadership and stuff like that. And that is true. And those are the use cases for doing this sort of thing. But actually what we found, and this is again, a sort of an explainer mindset that can help in thinking about any sort of deliverable that you're creating. Actually, what we found is that there are three main use cases in the client's mind for how they want to use this sort of work. So when they've had a project, they want to then sort of socialize it into the organization and get people to really understand it. There's three main things that they want to do. So one of them is just simply to summarize the work. So you might have done a debrief, and it might be asked, okay, can you produce something that just summarizes like the top 3 or the top 5 findings from this project, so that I can get people to really just get up to speed on it very, very quickly. And that's quite an expected sort of use case, really. One that we didn't expect quite so much, and actually we're finding is really hugely important for clients these days, is to put together a piece that actually promotes the project. So not the findings of the project or the insights from it, but actually what this project is and why you as a stakeholder should use it. So where to find the report, where to find the insights team, but actually what commercial decisions can this project help you to make, and why is it important? And that's something that we're finding is a really big use. And again, something to think about, from the very beginning of a project, how are we going to help our clients at the end? Not just know what the findings are and what the insights are, but promote them to their stakeholders throughout the organization. What can we do to do that? And then the final use is about kind of activating an actual insight itself. So it might be that there's one key finding that's absolutely pivotal for that organization, and they really need to understand it, because if they don't, they're going to go off on a wrong path around their decisions. So it might be a piece that's, this is the one thing you need to know. For example, if you think you're about to do price promotions, don't go down that road, because all of our research suggests it's a really bad idea. That's it really from us. We've learned all of these things from explainer videos. We felt that it really this thing about this explainer mindset could be really, really helpful to people, regardless of whether they're making an explainer video or whether you're just sort of thinking about how to help your clients get more from the research that you're doing, and just how to present it in a more sort of storytelling fashion.
That was really interesting, really useful, and actually fascinating that a lot of what you're suggesting could apply equally well to non-video feedbacks and briefings to clients. So there's nothing in the chat box at the moment, but I'm sure there are people out there who would love to ask you some questions. Anybody want to put their hand up, put their webcam on, and carry on the discussion? So Simon has asked, what does it cost to commission one?
It's a good point.
String, yeah.
I mean, you know exactly what we're going to say to this. It totally depends. It depends. a typical project, we don't sort of bill by the minute, because it's, you know, as you'll find with sort of like report writing and so forth, sometimes things are long, sometimes things are short, and it's just appropriate for the project itself. But what we will do will typically, you know, last maybe around 4 or so minutes. The sort of the window, depending on complexity, is anywhere between about 8 and 20,000. But that depends on sort of inputs, how complex is the story to sort of like research and understand, and sort of what kind of visual elements are in there. But one thing that we have discovered, and we think is happening more, is that clients are, or some of the more proactive clients, are thinking about the activation budget when they're thinking about project costs overall. So this idea of, okay, my budget is X, but I need 15% of it to activate it around the business, and that's where something like this becomes, I guess, a bit more tangible for them.
Okay, I think probably you've answered the grubby commercial question. How much would a client expect to pay for summarising a vid? Is that okay, Kevin? Have you got your answer there? Diana asks whether you could show us 1 or 2 of your explainer videos. Presumably that's not something quickly to hand. How do you protect your IP? Again, a question from Kevin.
Well, I guess IP is in intellectual property, is in like the actual deliverable or the brand. Well, I guess, you know, we make explainer videos, but everything is tailored to the project. I guess that's why our, you know, costs can vary so massively. But essentially, you know, we're making it for the client. It's got their IP in there already, so it might have their branding or their logos, but you know, every video is completely unique and different, and so therefore, because the client's commissioning it, it's kind of up to them really. And you know, a lot of these things are internal as well, so you know, it's a comms piece for the brand.
Yeah, so we will have that conversation with the clients about who their audience is. The vast majority, as Dan says, it's internal, both to their own organization or with their suppliers or end customers or whoever it may be. So it's sort of most of what we do would never make it out into the wild anyway. So it's not about the sort of the giving away of information or insights. Now, sometimes a client may want something that can be seen by the whole wide world, but again, that we just take that into account when we're designing it, and what information they would be happy to share versus what they wouldn't.
Does that answer your question, Kevin, or do you want to come in and ask anything more? If not, we'll move on to...
No, that's all good, thank you.
To Daljit. What's the easiest way of getting started, i.e. a DIY explainer video, for someone without much experience of these videos, even if used to a storytelling approach in presentations? So yeah, how do you get started on something like this?
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, there are tools out there, of course, you know, like for throwing together like some simple videos, but I think it's really, I think the main thing we kind of want to emphasize, the takeaway from here is like that the story is really strong. And so it doesn't really matter the tool that you're using. I think it's about coming up with a good story and a way to approach it. So whether you decide to make a video is kind of, you know, up to you. All I would say is like, if that's not the best route for telling the story, then or the tool isn't quite sharp enough for the job, and it's maybe not the best approach. And you know, it's not to criticize, but a lot of these like free things online aren't sharpest tool in the box. You know, they're very functional. You know, we pull on a lot of different softwares and image libraries that, you know, do cost money and are quite expensive for that reason. You know, if a client's, you know, spending money on this thing, then you know, you've got to kind of get to the good stuff. And I imagine it's the same for a panel or anything like that, really.
Yeah, and to sort of weave Lucy's question in, which is there a simple AI explainer video tool that will put us out of business? Thanks, Lucy. It's as with sort of all forms of AI, it's what you put into it. So something that can generate video, image, text, whatever it is, generates it. If you've not thought through how and why you want to say the things that you want to say, it's not going to be able to create anything. So Dan's absolutely right. You need to know the story that you're going to tell. Going back to what's the title, what's the hook, some of that structural stuff that Judith shared earlier, that needs to be completely mapped out. You know, within our business, Judith and I don't produce video ourselves. We're both on the story element because that's how important it is in making the sort of the right product as well. So so yeah, I would, you know, if it's not sort of a natural thing for you, I would recommend that you sort of Google around for different storytelling devices. There's, you know, the Pixar one, for example, is a popular one to follow, and just sort of use that framework to try and create something better. And then, you know, if it's a PowerPoint delivery, it won't quite write itself, but if you feel really strong and really confident in that structure, it will be a breeze to produce that kind of PowerPoint by comparison to just opening a blank slide and thinking, right, how the heck do I turn all my research findings into something interesting?
Yeah, I think it's the same with any kind of video production. I mean, you know, I come like from a film background. You wouldn't just go, I want to make a film and get on set on day one. You would spend
Yeah.
a lot of time pre-production. You really spend a lot of time on the script, the characters, the wardrobe, like everything would be so thought out. And then you might spend a day on set, and then you spend a lot of time in the edit. So actually, you know, in terms of like the time that you would spend making the thing, it's proportionately not maybe as big as you think. Like when I'm working on like the production side of things, for example, um, you know, we've spent so much time up to that point really thinking about all the imagery we want to use. We'll have so many sources. We'll have a massive storyboard and documents to pull from to actually make this thing. And then we'll kind of go, okay, right now we can actually start, you know, the production, the edit and making it. And we'll have had multiple rounds of client sign off before then as well. So I think that would be my kind of, you know, it's not to put people off, you know, these tools online, some of them are good. Yeah, it's just I think the takeaway here is it's more of a headspace kind of and a way of thinking about approaching, you know, research from an explanation point of view.
So typically at the end of a project, of a research project, how much extra would you need to add in for developing an explainer video? Are we talking about 2 or 3 weeks, or is it typically what might it take?
It generally takes between 3 and 4 weeks for a sort of a standard one. The earlier that we're in the process, or if you're doing it yourself, you are thinking through the process, obviously the better, because you can be thinking about the story and building it as it's being done. It's not the kind of thing you can chuck together if all the research comes back on the Thursday evening and the debrief is on Friday lunchtime. Obviously it can't be done in that kind of time frame. But yeah, around about 4 weeks to produce, and that, as Dan says, that's because so much of it is in that sort of storyboarding and refining and sort of like perfecting.
I think to emphasize the mindset again, I think it's something that you should be thinking about from the very beginning. So, you know, when you're writing a questionnaire, you know, you're thinking not only about how do I gather the data, but also how's this going to be presented, and what's the story going to be here. So, you know, the earlier you can start thinking about the whole thing as a cohesive piece, then you know the quicker it is really. So yeah, if it's been thought out from the very beginning all the way through, then you're kind of at the story at the same time as you're doing all the analysis. So it's not a case of like you do the analysis, you get the debrief, and then it's like, right, now let's think about the story. You know, you need to be thinking about it from literally the very beginning of the project.
Okay, so I think there's just one question that we've missed so far, which is, have you ever used puppets in your videos?
I'm just going to bring this
Yeah.
up just for a second.
We use all sorts of things. We use Jelly Baby.
Yeah, so if you look in the top left of this screen here, we have used jelly babies to visualize Cantor data in the past. I will stop
Buying
sharing.
buying jelly babies as a sort of like business expense is quite fulfilling. I will
Not
say
good as
that.
your breakfast, though.
Yeah, but I mean,
We had,
some
yeah,
of
we
it's
did.
animated.
Oh,
Sorry, Dan, go on.
I was just gonna say we did a project which was around breakfast, and I had about 50 quid's worth of breakfast delivered to my house to make a video with. So that was very fun.
And then we used a bagel as a pie chart. So
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay. Any more questions? DEI jelly babies. I don't know. I'm not sure I know what DEI means.
Red,
they were very diverse.
red and green.
They were of
Yes.
all the colours.
Yeah.
Ask that last question.
Don't ask that.
Too late. Too late, and it's on to you. Any more questions, anyone? No. Anybody want to make a comment, add anything to the conversation? So how does it work commissioning, writing you into proposals? How about that one?
So we've been in advance and in retrospect. So we do a lot of work with agencies where either a client has asked for it or they want to do something to stand out, either in a competitive pitch or because they've been working with a client for a number of years now and they're looking to demonstrate that they're still thinking about how to improve the service, etc., etc. So we will sit down with the agency and talk through the brief that they've got or the proposal they're putting together, and we will kind of go away and create a cost, and we can work up a deck or whatever it may be so that they can include that as part of their proposal. And then some will put it in as an optional extra, some will bake it into the overall cost. It's kind of at the discretion of the agency themselves. We've also done stuff where a project has happened and then maybe there's the feeling that it hasn't quite landed as everybody collectively would have hoped, and then we're sort of brought in to kind of re-energize that sort of landing. So it's aligned to a project, but it sort of it followed thereafter. I would say the majority of stuff that we do is aligned to a particular, a segmentation project or a UNA or a big qual piece or whatever it may be. It's got that hero thing in the middle. But the sort of the mentality of it, what's your client's problem, how do I sort of magpie different elements from different sources and different secondary things like that, do not, if you're thinking about how to serve your clients better, do not necessarily have to be aligned to your sort of big hero work stream, if that makes sense.
Okay, well that's great. Looks like we've run out of questions. So, Lucy's just put her webcam on. Did you want to ask something else, Lucy?
Guys, I think I must have missed the beginning, so I really apologise, and I'm sure it's all over the promotion for this webinar. But what's your brand? Who are you?
We are explainers.
Yeah.
We want to work with you, and we want to write you into proposal. We want to partner with you. Who are you?
Yeah. So we so all three of us are ICG members. We're an ICG marriage. But yeah, we collectively our brand is Explners. We can share our website, which is explners.com, without the AI in the spelling in the middle of it. And yeah, we specialize in insights activation. The way we do it is through explainer videos primarily, but it's the sort of the fundamentals of activation more generally that we're sort of interested in talking about today.
I was just going to say something to maybe leave on, which is that like there's so much of this stuff online, and we our sort of thing is thinking, how can we bring it to the insight world to use it, for our clients, use these tools. But on a sort of general curiosity level, I would recommend just going on YouTube and just, looking at explainer videos, they're really interesting. The format is really engaging. There's bound to be something on a topic that you really like. And I think if you can find things that you're inspired by and engaged with and look at that, you can see how that story is being told, whether it be about ice cream or whether it be about electric cars or anything. These things exist by a range of publications from, the BBC to The Guardian, to independent journalists. They're essentially working like journalists, but there's a lot of overlap with what we do as researchers. So I would recommend just going and have a nosy and thinking about the kind of things that we've talked about around how can we adopt this mindset. Just go and have a look and see what you think, because some really cool content out there to have a nosy at.
So just coming back to an earlier question, is there do you have any examples of the things that you've done on your website that people can look at?
Yeah, we've got a handful of case studies with specific clients and talking about the work we've done, but we've also got some example videos and a gallery of loads of stills and fun things that look good.
Yeah, as much as we'd love to come on here and just show our videos, we didn't feel like that was appropriate. So but yes, you can see them on the site.
It's just explainers.com. I've just popped that into the chat for everyone.
Yeah. So, okay, so there's one more question. Do you do any of that style the RSA used to do with someone live drawing pictures of a story?
Yes, that's the kind of like the big collage of a sketch, and then you see a hand kind of doing this. Yeah, we haven't done anything like that, but we definitely can. I think it's the kind of thing we were saying earlier about we can adopt, and the explainer mindset is to adopt this any kind of style and try and find the thing that suits the story. We haven't used anything like that because it hasn't massively been the right kind of approach, but
Yeah.
We did work with a client that actually had an artist come in and do the live, the thing where you've got a workshop and somebody live draws it and creates a brilliant sort of output from that. And we did actually work with someone who had some of that as a resource to put in, but it's not something we've done ourselves from scratch.
It's really interestingly, there's an animate, that sort of, I know what you're referring to, Simon. That's sort of that digital animated thing that's sort of like sketches over a kind of a canvas. Again, there's really good examples, and I'll send you a link if you want, of sort of doing that physically. There was a video by Vox that Judith mentioned earlier that was talking about election results in the US, sorry, really data heavy. Actually, a lot of the data was drawn by hand, like literally by hand, or the charts will have been printed and then the arrows on the charts were drawn with felt pen with a real hand. And it's just, obviously you could have done that with an arrow on PowerPoint or digitally really, really easily. But because of that sort of that combination of physical and animation, it made it so much more impactful just to see somebody drawing a line. And it's those kinds of like little subtle things that kind of keep an audience engaged, where you just do something a little bit more unexpected.
Yeah, I think there's a human in the room when that's happening.
I was going to say the thing there, the reason the adoption there is going back to the story kind of like explainer mindset is the headspace was the client wanted to show how people can interact with this data. So we showed someone interacting with it. We showed a hand interacting with it. So the message was coming across subconsciously. It goes back to all of that thing I was saying before about like, visuals connecting to the story. The whole piece there was we've got this really important piece of work and this chart and all these stakeholders, we want them to use it and mess with it. And like, so we were like, well, let's show some hands like messing with like these charts and things. So we've used that before.
I love your comment there, Annabelle, about overhead projectors and reinventing that. It's like there was someone talking about like a D2C milk subscription business, and it's like, yeah, they existed 50 years ago. Everybody had it. Like it's all cyclical in the end, isn't it?
Yeah, it's all coming back into fashion now.
That'll be the day. I hope not.
Maybe there's a niche there for like a research agency that just does everything on OHPs.
But
it'll come around.
It sounds ludicrous, but if you went into a debrief now and did that, I guarantee, did it on an overhead projector rather than PowerPoint, I
Yeah.
guarantee everybody would be absolutely transfixed and they would talk about it for months. And if we go back to the beginning, which is what are you trying to get your clients to do? It's like remember this stuff, engage with this stuff, and action this stuff. Something like that. Like, why not?
I heard someone talking about a really brilliant stakeholder engagement strategy the other day, and it was like, well, we're going to do some focus groups, but we're actually going to get the stakeholders to be in the room behind, and then we'll run a discussion with them, like, well, you know, and we'll discuss. And I was like, yeah, that's just what used to happen, isn't it? That's exactly what we used to do. So yeah, exactly the same thing, all cyclical, all comes back.
Yeah, so Andrew's going to fax his debriefs to his. That's brilliant. You all look far too young to remember things like acetates and faxes and things. So. Okay, well, I think we've probably run out of questions unless anybody's got any more last minute things that they want to ask. Otherwise, thank you so much, Mark, Dan and Judith. It was a really interesting presentation, and thanks for answering all those questions and making us giggle a bit.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for coming
Thanks to everyone for logging in. Do come back for one of our next webinars, and have a great afternoon. Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.